Fuck around, make my 40 pop.
Boruto episode 206. Alright guys, this episode was pretty much everything that we expected plus more. One thing that I do want to point out is that we learned a lot of new things in this episode. Now, one of the first things that I do want to talk about has to be Boro. Boro and his plot and scheme to build a cult has to be one of the most disgusting things I have ever seen in my life. In this episode, we actually found out exactly what that dark mist was. For example, the first time that we did get to see it is against that shinobi that actually tried to confront him about his BS back when he's actually trying to convert his sister. Now, at that particular point, all he did was flash his hand over the guy's face or over the shinobi's face, and then the shinobi just completely fainted. We had absolutely no idea what happened at that particular point, but at that particular point, Boro actually infected that man with a virus, and now we find out that Boro has been going into villages upon villages doing the exact same thing to everybody in the village, coming along and basically visiting that village and curing people as if he is the savior. This man has to be one of the most disgusting people I've ever seen. I ain't gonna lie, it is kind of genius, but we understand now exactly what Boro is all about. But not only that, we also find out that Boro is damn near immortal at this particular point. Manga readers, we already knew this, but anime owners were kind of starting to understand exactly what Boro is all about. His regeneration abilities is next level at this particular point. His regeneration abilities is probably better than Orochimaru's, better than Victor, damn it better than everybody that we have actually seen before. You can actually compare it to Majin Buu from the Dragon Ball Z series. This guy is literally like gum at this particular point. They blew half of his body off, similar to what Kawaki did to Garo, and he shrugged it off like it was absolutely nothing. Now, I did kind of get ahead of myself a tiny bit. I did want to talk about the animation at the beginning of the review, but turns out that I couldn't necessarily do that. But regardless, the animation in this episode right here was actually very good. I talked about this in my last video. I talked about how the animation team behind it wasn't necessarily the dream team like episode 204 or the past great episodes, but it was definitely an elite team, and they definitely did not disappoint. When it comes to episodes like this, I don't expect it to be very good quality, mainly because there is supposed to be a big episode that everybody's going to be wanting to see, which is going to be episode 208. So anything that we do get in these upcoming episodes, episode 206 and 207, it's really only icing on the cake. Now, I don't necessarily expect it to be absolute garbage animation, but I really didn't expect it to be this good. Like, there was some really good shots in this episode. Now, another thing that I do want to talk about is a little bit of a difference between the Boruto manga and the Boruto anime. In the Boruto manga, it really seemed like Sarada was the one to actually discover that what Boro was using was the viruses. Now, this right here plays into an overall bigger conversation that I do want to have. The Boruto anime had Mitsuki do all of the heavy lifting and actually realized that it was actually a virus. Now, when it comes to the actual quote-unquote leader of the Team 7, or the leader of the new Team 7, by the way, Konohama is taking another L, but that's besides the point. The leader of the new Team 7 in this episode, just talking about the anime, not necessarily talking about the Boruto manga, it really seemed like Mitsuki should have actually been the new Team 7 leader. Obviously, Sarada got them out of there, Sarada got them to retreat, but that was literally after Mitsuki said, like, yo, I should probably retreat. Now, of course, Sarada didn't give Mitsuki the opening, but damn near everything in this episode was kind of catalyzed by Mitsuki. Now, again, I have all the respect for Sarada. I really wish they didn't necessarily change that scene, mainly because we understood that in the Boruto manga, they made it seem like Sarada was the one to actually uncover that it was a virus. And not only that, another big thing that they did do to Sarada, they did not necessarily give her the third tomo in the Boruto manga. She had the third tomo by this time. And people always want to talk about nerfing Naruto and nerfing Sasuke in the Boruto anime. I think this right here is a clear way, or a clear example of some characters being nerfed. Sarada in this arc right here was definitely nerfed from the Boruto manga to the Boruto anime. But nonetheless, even without those key moments in the actual episode, she definitely held her own. It was a certain situation where Sarada was actually 1v1ing Boro. Now, we understand obviously, but Sarada's not necessarily going to be able to actually 1v1 Boro, but she definitely held her own. One of the things that was really surprising to me, even when I seen in the Boruto manga, was the fact that her fire style fireball jutsu matched a Kata organization insider's lava style attack. Now, obviously, we don't necessarily know if that's going to be as much as a go-to move to Boro as the fire style fireball jutsu is to Sarada, but I just personally think that right there was a feat in itself. Not only that, it looked like Sarada was clearly faster than Boro in this episode, but the biggest thing overall from Sarada is the fact that she actually did cultivate, or it seems like she actually did cultivate that plan to have Boruto and Kawaki jump out of nowhere and use the unison Rasengan. Now, I think it's no big secret, the Boruto anime over the past couple of years has pretty much been slandered for the bad writing, but I think this right here was actually genius from the Boruto writers. And here's what I mean. Back in, I believe, episode 158, either 158 or 159, I don't know, it was one of those two episodes, Mitsuki actually got hurt doing one of the exact same things that he did in this episode. In this episode, when he actually attacked Boro, he used one of his snakes to inject Boro with a little bit of poison or a little bit of venom. But in that same instant, he actually used a snake to take a bit of Boro's blood and use that as the antidote or the antibody in this episode. But we know that Mitsuki was able to do that mainly because Mitsuki got hurt doing that very exact same thing back in Boruto episode 159. In that episode, Team 7 was fighting against a guy with the Hashirama cell, and in that episode, the Hashirama cell was extremely unstable. Anybody who actually came close to it or actually used the Hashirama cell was most likely going to die. And in that episode, Mitsuki's snake took a chunk of the Hashirama cell, and because of that, Mitsuki got very sick all throughout the beginning of the deeper arc. So we know that Sarada played a huge role in this episode, and we also know that Mitsuki played a huge role in this episode. But of course, Naruto and Kawaki were the two people that actually put this thing together. Now, the unison attack seems like something that has been building for a very long time. Kawaki talked about how back when his fight versus Garo, he understood that he was a little bit stronger, man, because his karma still was resonating off of Boruto's. And even in this episode right here, at the beginning of the episode, we've seen a certain situation where Kawaki actually put his hands on Boruto when he was using the Rasengan. It seemed like the Rasengan that Boruto did actually use had a little bit of boost. So foreshadowing in this episode, the storyboard looked absolutely amazing. So regardless, in the actual end, it seemed like they played directly into that special ability. Had Boruto and Kawaki used their karma seals in unison to actually boost the Rasengan to a completely different level. Now, the Boruto anime kind of changed the scene a tad bit from the Boruto manga. In the Boruto manga, Boruto hitting Boro with the Rasengan was extremely detailed and was extremely gruesome. I think Boro in this episode had the potential to look a lot like how Garo looked when Kawaki actually blew his body, or blew half of his body off of his legs. That right there would have been absolutely amazing for this episode. But again, I do want to point out, I wasn't necessarily expecting a lot from this episode in regards to animation, choreography, and etc. But I just thought that that right there could have possibly took this episode to a completely different level. I actually do think that they kind of censored it a little bit. We didn't necessarily get to see a lot of blood, possibly because of Boro, his own abilities. His regeneration doesn't necessarily cause for a lot of blood, so that right there might have been a little bit acceptable. But when Boro was actually laying on the floor, we didn't necessarily get to see half of his body off, but we did get to see it when Boro actually stood up and started to regenerate. So I was really happy with that. But all in all, I really liked this episode. I'm pretty sure you guys liked it as well. I think the next episode is going to be similar to this. That's going to be episode 207. I've been saying all along, episode 208 is going to be the episode that we're probably going to be really excited to see and really enjoy. But let me know what you guys think about this episode in the comment section below. And Sarada and Sakura fans out there, let me know what you guys think about Sarada's role kind of being a little bit decreased in the anime version, because I think the Boruto manga made Sarada feel like she was on a completely different level. She had the third tome where she was the one to actually discover the virus, but I do still think that in this episode they did represent Sarada a good way. Even though she did kind of get quote unquote nerfed a bit, she was still represented a little bit well. But let me know what you guys think. It's me, your boy Baara, and we out.
It's a knife.